I don't share much about PeopleRain with our community, but I'm going to break protocol. PeopleRain is the product version of the ethos behind this great Team Human community. Our team is passionate about giving the next billion employees back 4 to 6 hours of productive time per week. Hundreds of organizations around the world trust PeopleRain to automate work because it's the safest, most trustworthy, and smartest way to automatically execute thousands of common IT and HR tasks. Consider it the antidote to AI that's either creepy or that poses a threat to human jobs. I'm hosting a live webcast where I will show a demo of agentic AI in action. Register for the webcast at peoplerain.io. That's people, reign like the reign of a queen or king.io. Now back to this week's amazing episode.
Yo, it's the future, don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People reign in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life, yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, you know. Okay, let's start the show.
It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jaime Lien, one of the co-founder of Archetype AI to AI in the Future of Work. We are recording this live from the show floor of HumanX. I've been looking forward to this one, reading up on Archetype. And let's get started, Jaime, by having you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to start a company.
Sure. So my background is actually not in AI originally at all. It's in sensing. And I did my education, especially in signal processing and being able to understand and analyze signals. My PhD, I started specializing in RF type of signals. For my PhD, it was applied to RF imaging from satellites in order to measure very small geophysical processes of the Earth. And so that kind of spurred my interest in these complex sensor modalities, which are not easily interpretable to humans, but have so much information and structure in the signals. And how do you extract that meaning from these complex type of data? I went to Google after that and started working with an innovation team, which was basically applying and developing new types of sensor modalities for human-computer interaction. And there, with the convergence of these new commoditized sensors, along with deep learning, machine learning, we really saw this ability to now extract new types of insights in a scalable way from these complex types of sensor data. So while we were at Google, we were seeing this huge opportunity now with this explosion of different commoditized sensors. Can you apply these new ML to AI techniques in order to really build a foundation layer for extracting intelligence and building intelligence on top of diverse types of sensor modalities? And that inspired us to leave together, 5 of us from Google left to start Archetype together with this goal of building a foundation model exactly for that, to interpret complex and diverse types of sensors, fuse them together into human interpretable meaning that actually has actionable insight and information for humans to act upon.
Every machine today and increasingly in the future will constantly beacon off data and almost all of its noise. You're one of the world's experts in this. Talk about the role of AI in distilling signal from noise when it comes to machine data.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think I come from a signal processing background. So much of signal processing theory and fundamentals is exactly this. How do you actually separate out the signal from the noise? Especially in radar, actually, there's a huge field of just trying to distinguish not even noise, but clutter. So signal that isn't relevant to you from signals of interest. And I think with AI, what the promise is that these types of differentiation of the signal components can be driven from data alone. And so fundamentally, what AI can be used for is to discover structure within these signals without having to predefine what that structure is. You can discover patterns that appear repeatedly. There's some sort of temporal recurrence or persistence to them. And that, there's been so much work, even in my own education, about how you hand design these heuristics and algorithms in order to do that. What we're saying is now a machine can discover how to do this from the data and from its sensor observations by itself. And so fundamentally, what we believe is that this layer of intelligence that can sit on top of, as you said, all the existing sensors today that are measuring different physical parameters, different internal and external conditions to the machinery. It can be used without necessarily having to predefine what it is that the signal of interest is. The machine can discover that structure on its own and turn it into some machine native concept of the way that it behaves and its different states of operation. Our model is exactly designed to do this. So it takes in diverse types of sensor data. It's able to represent that data into one common structured latent space. And then on top of that latent space, build an understanding of the different operational states of the system and how they transition to each other. And all of that can be done without having to inject human labels of what those preconceived states from our perspective should be.
Once the algorithm detects, let's say, an anomalous pattern, it identifies the pattern correctly, doesn't a human need to go in and assign some meaning to the pattern before you want to make any decision based on just the brute force acknowledgement that there's an anomalous pattern?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually what we've seen from a lot of our existing enterprise customers is that before they want to give AI full autonomy and closed loop control, they want to build confidence by having a human in the loop, exactly for this reason, to make sure that the action that you want to take is appropriate for the meaning of the anomaly as it appears. And so that's why I think it's actually really important to have these models that are designed to have a human interpretable interface. We don't necessarily want to go straight to an action model. We want to go to a reasoning and communication model that can develop its own understanding of the underlying system dynamics and behavior, and then be able to communicate that to humans, be able to epistemically reason about it, and then explain that reasoning to a human operator or to a human collaborator. And that, I think, is one of the big distinctions between what we're trying to build and, for example, a robotics model, which maybe is action-oriented and task-oriented, not necessarily designed for communicating to a human what sort of epistemic reasoning happens under the hood.
With a platform as powerful as what you're building, there's great responsibility because, for example, if the pattern in the data, hypothetically speaking, leads the heavy machine arm to swing faster when it shouldn't, the consequences can be dire. And the software might be performing accurately, but something subtle can have very broad ramifications. How do you think about ethics, all the implications of things that are really hard to build in when we're just building software, in a pre-AI age of kind of heuristics-based development?
Yeah, and I think this gets to the earlier question that where we see immediate value, but also what makes sense from the safety and security and confidence building stage is that there's this first phase of human in the loop. So machine being able to explain its underlying reasoning to a human so that it's not just direct to action that a human has no control over. And so we see this machine/AI human collaboration as not just a feature, but a requirement. The machine shouldn't be able to just blindly take action at this stage without being able to inform a human of why it's taking that action and what its own understanding of the underlying reasons for taking that action should be.
I imagine you must think critically about both the impact of a false negative decision. It doesn't make a decision, even though it has the right answer, and a false positive. It makes a bad decision.
Right.
And you mentioned the human in the loop, and but how do you instrument a platform like yours so that you're providing appropriate guidance?
Yeah.
Taking into account the potential impact of both sides of those automated decisions.
Yeah. I think it's really important for a model such as this to be steerable. And so there has to be the ability for a human interface in order to guide or steer the model of how you want it to behave. And that's why this language interface, a human, natural language way to express to the model or to the machine of what it should do, it should not do, in order to guide the way that its outputs are presented or action is taken, is really important and one of the critical things that we're building into our model.
Any examples of where maybe a customer or prospective customer has asked for a feature where you, as the expert, have said you might not want what you think you want, and where you've had to kind of calibrate, even though it might be something you can sell, but where you've had to say whether it's on ethical grounds or safety grounds, this is something we're not going to do.
We've been pretty aligned in terms of we believe that at this stage, it's still desirable and maybe necessary to have a human in the loop rather than having closed loop control. And so we have specifically tried to address use cases that also align with our customers' requirements of needing a human in the loop and having that provide value immediately. So I guess a short answer to your question is that we're not going right away to closed loop autonomy, even though we have the technical capability to do that. We believe that there is a confidence building stage of AI where the human needs to have insight into the machine's underlying reasoning and way of arriving at a certain decision. And after this stage, potentially, we can go to further levels of autonomous action. But we see this as a precursor to that.
On this podcast, we talk a lot about responsible AI. All of us that are building an AI have to not just answer the obvious question, which is what could go right, but what could go wrong. When I was preparing for this, I was just spinning on all the, how you might answer that question. Now I have a chance to ask the expert. What could go wrong, and how do you think about ethical boundaries?
I think one aspect of this is we have to be able to objectively evaluate the model's capabilities and the limits of its performance. And so one of the objectives that our company has this year is to build a benchmark for physical AI and specifically the areas that we're trying to address. And this should be informed by, not just existing benchmarks that exist today for LLMs, but what are the, specific characteristics of dynamical physical systems where you need to detect things that might have great significance in terms of downstream impact, like anomaly detection or physical states of the machine. So that's one aspect, developing objective ways to actually quantify and measure this performance so that we have some degree of assessing how trustworthy the model is. I think the second aspect is, I was mentioning, interpretability and explainability. So there has to be the ability to understand where the model is coming from, where it arrives at certain decisions. And I think these are things that have to be, you have to define over the course of development that these are priorities. They're not something that can be added in after the fact. So
we're inundated with discussions about the constraints. We have the use cases, there's demand, but there are very real compute constraints, algorithm constraints. You're very familiar with all of them. What do you think are the hardest or the biggest constraints outside of Archetype that might constrain a company's ability to do what you otherwise could do?
Well, fundamentally, we're trying to provide value to people who need specialized intelligence. We call it local intelligence. So intelligence that's specific for their particular assets or their particular machinery or their particular factory. And so fundamentally, our thesis is that this sort of intelligence can be formed from observation of sensor data. So in terms of constraints, I think like those sensors already exist largely today. But is there that, I would say, the data streams, the infrastructure to be able to feed that into a local environment where you can have this intelligence form and where the model inference can live? So it's less about, I think, the model itself and more, does the infrastructure for inference at a scalable size exist, and what does it take to deploy that?
Good answer. Based on the way you've designed Archetype, is the kind of the world of industrial machinery, like the kind of data that it's presently instrumented to beacon off? Is that, do you assume a world where the existing systems beacon off data that you're capable of handling, or are you expecting a new type of data or data architectures to enable the kinds of sensor data that you'd like to have?
No, so our model is designed so that it can work with existing sensors in the world today. And there's so many. I mean, there was this explosion of IoT, 10, 15 years ago. And so there's a huge commoditization of sensor hardware that has been occurring over the last decade. So you see even once exotic sensors. I mean, we came from developing the first radar embedded into a consumer smartphone. RF today is a commodity sensor. You can have access to all of these very rich and non-human-like signals and information about the world through these sensors. What is missing, I think, is the generalized way to build intelligence off of them. So that's what we're trying to offer with our foundation model and our platform is there are these rich signals all around us that are not intuitively familiar to a human. Can we build the intelligence layer to turn that into something that humans can actually understand and interpret? And imbue that into the machines themselves.
I was hoping you would say that. I assume so. I didn't want to assume it. So presumably there were a lot of creature comforts that you had at Google that you left behind. I don't mean to break rooms and silliness, but as a scientist, as a researcher, I imagine that there's some advantages, opportunities that you had at Google. Then I imagine there are also some advantages that you have at a smaller company that's your own.
Yeah.
Talk us through kind of what has it been like to be on your own, where there are opportunities, but where there may be challenges you didn't anticipate.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest difference to me has been just the scale and scope of what I've been exposed to in a startup compared to in a big corporation. Just having this visibility and direct impact even on all the go-to-market motions, all the branding, marketing, operations, all the layers of software development that have to happen even outside of the AI is super interesting and I think super exciting to witness. I think as a researcher, obviously, like the compute resources that you have access to in a place like Google are quite different in scale, I would say, to what we have access to as a startup. But honestly, I don't necessarily see that as a completely bad thing. I think constraint drives innovation. It drives new ways to think about things. There's always the brute force approach of, more compute, more data. But I think the real innovation comes in when you have to address realistic constraints that our customers will have, that we have. I mean, given just funding and financial, budgeting, we have to operate within the limits of what we have today. And I think we've actually done a pretty good job in providing value given those resources. So I'm pretty happy to say, I think we do have an innovation spirit where these constraints on resources don't necessarily have to hold us back. They can be something that enables us to differentiate and provide something new and valuable.
The entrepreneurial journey is intense in ways that those who have not started companies can never. There's a shared language, right? It's impossible to appreciate, how intense the experience is. What has starting the company so far taught you about yourself that maybe surprised you?
Oh, I think going back to the scope of things that I've been exposed to in a company, I think just seeing that I can even
Incredibly
say
empowering.
something say something that makes sense in these spheres that I didn't come from. I didn't come from a marketing or even a software engineering background really. And yeah, I think it is confidence building. It's incredible, I think, just to have the mental connection to people who work in that space and be able to discuss with them at a level where actual information and meaning is exchanged has been really, I think, wonderful. Um, but yeah, the challenges are real. I mean, I'm a parent. I had two young kids. My second one was born, I want to say, like right after we incorporated the startup. And so there's definitely, you learn things about time management and like hours of work that you didn't think were possible originally. Somehow you make do, and it's been really rewarding. I think, yeah, I'm incredibly privileged to be on this journey. I think, especially with the people that I am with.
So many appropriate analogies with the parenting journey.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. You somehow reach deep inside and find a wellspring of energy and passion that you didn't realize was there.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think it's possible unless you really are passionate and interested in what you're doing. So, and it's a privilege, I think, to be able to work on something like that. So I feel thankful and grateful
Privileged
every
to
day.
work for it.
Yeah.
We're about out of time for this lightning round conversation, but I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me. I can just see how, and from what I've read up, mission-driven Archetype is. How do you plan to change the world? How's the world different when your products are ubiquitous?
Yeah. I think for me, what is incredibly exciting is that there's this potential to interpret the physical world around us through these sources of information and sensor modalities that are maybe very foreign to us as humans. Like, I'm incredibly excited by new discovery. And I think that's something that AI and Archetype in particular can possibly enable. The potential not just to automate, but to discover something fundamentally new about the world around us is incredibly inspiring. I think it goes beyond even like what AI has demonstrated today, but holds the promises of for the future. And that's really what I think I look forward to the most.
It's important that you're driven by something that's bigger than code. It's bigger than a software challenge. And I know that you and your co-founders, when you started the company, had that level of ambition.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. We are all wishing you nothing but success.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Same. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Great work.
Yo, it's the end of the show, time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team Human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from People Rain, making us better. We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future, that's all for now. See you next time.